You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron and to some more free agency predictions. Today, I'm looking at the Houston Texans sitting on about $63 million in cap space going into this offseason. I'm going to dive into some of the re-signings that I'm expecting or would like to see from the team. I'll also talk some positions of need and go over some guys that I wouldn't mind seeing the Houston Texans go after. And as always, this is not every single thing I think they're going to do. This is just the stuff I would like to see and or expect to see from the Texans. So Houston fans, let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree with some of the things I'm saying or not? Who would you like to see the Texans target as far as free agents are concerned? Who do you want to see them bring back going into next year? But I'm going to dive right in and start off with my very first re-signing here. And I think this one goes without saying here. Edge rusher Jonathan Gridiron, who's going to be 27 years old next season here. Spotrac averaging about $13.5 million or so for his AAV for whatever contract extension or contract he ends up signing going into free agency here. I mean, you look at the numbers, 52 tackles, 15 for a loss, 32 total pressures with 12.5 sacks, and 35 defensive stops per PFF. I mean, the guy had a massive year and finished off very strong as well, and I do think is a very ideal running mate for Will Anderson Jr. going into the foreseeable future for at least the duration of his rookie contract or so. So with somebody like this who can create the pressure, who can set the edge opposite of your first round selection in Anderson, I'm talking something along the lines of like a 3-year deal or so. I think that'd be a really good sweet spot there. If you're going to have to pay him roughly that 12 to 13 million or so that Spotrac is putting it at, I don't think that's too bad of a number considering just how high edge rushers can go this day. Given that he did hit 12.5 sacks, I wouldn't be shocked if maybe that number pushes towards 14, maybe even close to 15. But with the way the cap number is going up right now, and again, we're talking a 3-year deal here. We're not strapping up for a very long time. It's not like we're talking 5 or anything like that. You bring him in, you front load a lot of the money considering how much room you have as far as the cap is concerned. You could pay him a lot more upfront initially out of the gate, and then from there, those final 2 years probably won't hurt as bad, so you can work with that money. But I don't think that paying Jonathan Gridiron anywhere along the lines of like 13, 14 million is too outside of the realm of realistic and or possibility. Second person here that I have listed, and this one is one of those, it was a fantastic 1-year deal, and it's unfortunate you didn't lock him up for longer because now you're probably going to have to pay him more, and that's tight end Dalton Schultz, who's going to be 28 years old going into next season here. Spotrac averaging about 11 million or so per year for whatever deal he winds up signing. The guy in 15 games averaged about 11 yards per reception, 59 catches on the year with 635 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like I said, signing a 1-year deal at $6.25 million was a no-brainer for him last season, and it sucks it wasn't a longer deal because now Schultz has become that security blanket over the middle for CJ Stroud, and I think with the chemistry that we saw between those two guys, it would be a massive mistake if the Texans aren't going out of their way to keep Dalton Schultz in their building. You cannot deny the comfort, reliability, the connection that you saw CJ Stroud form with Schultz this past season here, and locking him up on something along the lines of like a 3-year deal. If you're paying him at about 11 million per year, and like I said, same deal, front load some more of that money now so you don't have to pay as much later on. It's a no-brainer with how cheap the wide receiver core is currently sitting right now. You have 2 guys that are still working on their rookie deals, and Noah Brown obviously is going to need some sort of money depending on how the Texans view him and if they want to keep him around. But overall, your receiving core is young. Spend the money on the tight end now, and then you can deal with that, 2 or 3 years down the road when you're revisiting a contract extension again for Schultz. But I mean, you cannot deny what was going on between him and CJ Stroud, and it would be a shame to let Schultz walk. The third and final guy that I have here, this one's not going to be one of those like home run kind of re-signings or anything like that, but definitely one that I think is worth considering at the very least, somewhere along the lines of like a 1 or 2 year deal. And that's going to be running back Devin Singletary, who's going to be 27 during next season, averaging about 5.3 million per Spotrac is what they're saying as far as his next contract should look like. He had 216 carries for 898 yards. He had 4 touchdowns along with 30 receptions, nearly 200 yards receiving, and only a singular fumble in those touches. I mean, the way I see it here, Dameon Pierce really showed up in his rookie season, and I would say maybe took a little bit of a step back the second season. Whether that was just the struggles and injuries along the offensive line or what, I'm not necessarily sure. But I do think having a good running back in Devin Singletary, who clearly has found comfort and success in your system, is one of those guys that, while it might not be one of those poster board re-signings, it's one of those good depth pieces to have at the running back position. And why would you want to let go of a piece who clearly had some sort of value within your system? For all the struggles that the Texans had running the football, at least Singletary had a little bit of a shine to him with all of that. So I do think that locking him up on like a 1 or 2 year deal for $5 million, like that's a no-brainer. And hell, that number might even be lower than that, considering just how low valued running backs are right now and what they're getting. I wouldn't be surprised if they could lock him up on a 1 or 2 year deal for only $3 million per year, something along those lines. But I do think he's one of those guys that it makes a lot of sense to keep around here. And again, with so much cap room to work with over there in Houston, it's a no-brainer. You don't owe a lot of money at a lot of other positions right now, so spend a little bit of it on keeping some of those guys that clearly showed they had value and then they fit your system really well. And that's kind of how I'm basing around my re-signings that I've just brought up here to you all. Now, shifting out of re-signings and looking at some of the positional needs and just who I think that the Texans should target going into this offseason, the first thing that comes to mind here is going to be center. I would like to see them grab a guy who has shown that he can handle the job of getting the offensive line set up and be that guy that CJ Stroud can trust to hand him the football each and every single down. The center basically sets up everything as far as the line of scrimmage is concerned. The football starts with the center before it goes to the quarterback. It's one of those low-key, very important positions, but I feel like does not get quite the recognition it deserves. And there are two guys that come to mind that could potentially be available this coming free agency that I think they should target. And that's going to be Connor Williams from Miami or Andre James from Las Vegas. Now, there's obviously the potential that either of these guys aren't even available, or they're both just not available, however it ends up shaping it out. But if Connor Williams and or Andre James are on the market, go get your guy. Like, shout out to Michael Dieter and Jarrett Patterson, who in his rookie season stepped up and took like 200 and some odd snaps at the center spot. But I want to see them go get a guy who's proven, who's done a really good job at the position so far and is well established to just, ease the mind of CJ Stroud and be that guy that can get him the football each and every single down and set up the line of scrimmage the way it needs to be set up each and every single time. Someone that CJ Stroud can have the utmost trust in. There's also always the potential that maybe a starting caliber guy gets cut, being a cap casualty. So there is some opportunity there. And again, I'm going to keep going back to you have that $63 million in cap room to work with. Don't be afraid to spend some of it, especially when it comes to the offensive line in a position as important as center. If there's starting quality guys available for you to upgrade your O-line, go after them. I highly believe this is something we will see addressed in this offseason, whether it's through free agency or a draft selection for Houston. The second position that I have highlighted here is going to be linebacker, and this is more so about Houston kind of getting their guy in the middle of their defense to lead that unit. D'Amico Ryan's number one guy that he can go to, that he knows is going to have that defense set up and ready to go each and every single play, who can wear that green dot on their helmet. When you think of guys like Roquan Smith and Fred Warner and what they mean to their defenses, I really think that Houston would benefit massively from getting one of those guys. And when you look at some of the top end linebackers that could potentially be available, and I do think that just because of recent contract extensions to higher positions of need and just how tight some of the cap room is going to be for some of those teams that have really good linebacking cores right now that are going to potentially lose a guy because of a cap casualty type of situation, you have Willie Gay Jr. who's going to potentially be on the market. You have Devin White who's going to potentially be on the market. Patrick Queen could potentially hit the market. I want to see the Texans swing big, and this is probably one of those positions where if there's any team that is going to be willing to go after one of those big ticket linebackers, it's going to be D'Amico Ryans and his Houston Texans. So go big or go home. Let me see you go get your guy in the middle of the defense that can lock things down for you for at least the next 3, 4, 5 years. And then finally, the third position here that I would like to see them, and this is one where I could even see them maybe doing it in the draft, but if at the right price and in the right situation, maybe you could just go ahead and address this, considering you already went and drafted your number one in Derek Stingley a couple of years ago. But I wouldn't be too against the idea of grabbing a cornerback within free agency. And I'm not talking like one of the upper echelon guys, one of those top guys that's going to run you close to like $20 million per year. Because like I said, Derek Stingley's supposed to be that number one for you. And based off the massive leap he took this year, I think he could wind up being that guy. You also had Steven Nelson, who is phenomenal in his year. And at 30 years old, the guy's playing like he's 20. So for me, attacking the cornerback position in free agency is more so just getting a good depth guy, or maybe a slot corner, someone you could fit in there, or just like a starting caliber guy that you can go to and trust. For as fun as it was watching the Texans this year, they were 10th in passing yards allowed on the season. So I think if you go after a guy like Akello Witherspoon from the Rams, or if Indianapolis is crazy enough to let Kenny Moore walk, maybe Levi Wallace from Pittsburgh, Sean Murphy-Bunting from Tennessee, Jerry Jacobs from Detroit, you can get yourself like a starting quality guy who isn't going to try to usurp Derek Stingley, or, you know, can work alongside Steven Nelson as the guys that are going to be working against the number 2s and number 3 wide receivers while Stingley handles his number 1 guy. So this for me is more about just adding depth and rounding out your secondary more than anything else. It's not like the utmost important, but even with the play of Steven Nelson, he is 30 years old. The likelihood that that continues well into his 30s is not very likely, but you never know. Why not go get a guy who's, 26, 27, 28, established, who can just continue to help round out the secondary? But that's kind of what I would like to see from the Texans, or what I'm, kind of expecting to see. Something along those lines. Again, not every single move that I think they're going to do. So I invite you Texans fans to let me know in the comment section down below. What do you want to see from them? They got a lot of money to work with here. Are there any guys that you have your eyes on specifically that you want to see the Texans and D'Amico Ryans go after? Let me know in that comment section. But that is it for me. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one.